It was a gray, quiet afternoon when Brad Pitt walked through the side entrance of the private medical center he helped build. No entourage. No cameras, just him in a plain white shirt, slightly wrinkled, jeans, sunglasses tucked into the collar. His face was tired, but focused. This wasn't a visit for press. He was there for something real. A week earlier, he'd quietly paid for a life-saving operation for a janitor's daughter, a young girl with a rare condition no insurance would touch. The man never asked for help. He didn't even know who the anonymous donor was. But Brad knew. And he couldn't stay away without seeing the child with his own eyes. So he walked down the hallway to the pediatric floor, carrying a small stuffed bear and a folded envelope with no signature. Every step was calm, every intention pure, and then it began. From behind a reception desk at the far end of the corridor, a voice cut the silence like a slap. "Sir." Sharp. Cold. Controlling. Brad turned. A man in a white coat was striding toward him, tall, clean-shaven, face tight with the kind of authority that had gone unchecked too long. His badge read Drive S. Renner, Chief of Admittance. "This area is restricted," the doctor barked. "Who are you here to see?" Brad kept his tone even. "Just visiting a patient. I've been cleared." But the doctor wasn't listening. His eyes scanned Brad's clothes, his unshaven jaw, his quiet posture, and saw only a man in the wrong place. "Did you come here to take selfies with sick kids?" he snapped. "Or are you lost looking for the fan tour?" Brad blinked once. "I don't need to explain myself." "Yes, you do," the man growled. "Because this is a hospital, not a red carpet. So unless you want security to escort you out, turn around. Now." The hallway fell still. A nurse peeked from behind a door. A few patients in wheelchairs froze mid-roll. Brad looked around. No one moved. He stepped forward, voice low but steady. "I'm here for a little girl whose surgery I paid for. I came to see her, hand her this bear, and leave. I don't need special treatment. I don't need attention." The doctor laughed, cruelly. "Oh, so now you're buying your way into pediatric units? That how you get your applause these days?" Brad's jaw tightened, not in anger. "In restraint. I'm here for her. Not for you." The doctor took another step forward. "You think money gives you access to people's pain? You think you own this place because you wrote a check once?" Brad didn't blink. The doctor pulled out his phone. "I'm calling security." He dialed. Loudly. Proudly, "This is Dr. Renner in East Hall. We've got an unauthorized male in restricted corridors refusing to leave. Possibly trespassing." And within seconds, the double doors at the end of the corridor opened and a tall security officer appeared. He walked calmly, respectfully. When he saw Brad, he stopped. Straightened. Nodded. "Mr. Pitt," the guard said, clearly. "Everything all right?" The doctor's face went pale. "What did you call him?" he said, almost laughing. "Mr. Pitt," the guard repeated. "He's authorized. Founding donor. Full access clearance." The silence that followed was louder than any siren. The doctor's lip curled. "You can't be serious." Brad just stood there. Not smug. Not victorious, silent. The doctor turned red. "He doesn't belong back here. I'm head of admittance, and I say this is a violation of privacy and security." "You're wrong," the guard said flatly, and that was when the doctor snapped. He stepped toward Brad, jabbing a finger toward his chest. "You think because you're famous, you can buy your way into sacred spaces? You think being adored gives you power here? I don't care who you are. This is a medical institution, and I will not be bullied by Hollywood entitlement." Brad's voice cut through the air. "You don't know who I am." The doctor froze. "You know my name. But not who I am," Brad said. "And after today, I'm making sure this hospital remembers the difference." He looked at the guard. "Call the director. Now." The air was thick with disbelief. With authority challenged. With a man whose title had never been questioned until now. Dr. Renner stood stiff, eyes darting between Brad and the security guard. The guard held his ground, silent now, waiting. Everyone else in the hallway, nurses, patients, a janitor with a mop still dripping on the tile, had stopped pretending not to look. "This is ridiculous," the doctor hissed. "You're telling me this man dressed like he wandered off the street has full access to my floors?" "He's not just a guest," the guard said. "He helped fund this entire pediatric wing. He signed the checks. That room you're standing next to? His money built it." "I don't care if he built the damn roof," the doctor snapped. "If he doesn't have a badge, he's violating protocol. And if you won't do your job, I'll find someone who will." The guard opened his mouth to respond, but Brad raised his hand. "I want to hear him," Brad said. "Let him speak." The doctor turned, almost laughing. "You want me to explain myself to you?" "No," Brad said. "I want to know how someone like you ended up in charge of people who are already suffering." That stopped the doctor cold. For a moment, there was silence. Not because he didn't have words, but because, for the first time, he didn't know which ones would save him. Then footsteps echoed down the hall. From around the corner came a nurse, older, calm, no badge flashing, no clipboard. Her name was Maria. Everyone knew her. 25 years in this hospital. The kind of nurse who remembered every patient's birthday and every doctor's worst moment. She walked right past the guard, right past Renner, and stood beside Brad. "Mr. Pitt," she said softly. "I didn't know you were coming today." Brad nodded. "I didn't want anyone to know." She looked down at the bear in his hand. Then up at his face. "You're here for little Lila?" "Yes," he said. "She doesn't know it was me." "She still doesn't," Maria said with a small smile. "She just says the man with kind eyes left a note for her dad. That's all she cares about." Behind them, the doctor rolled his eyes. "This is absurd. You're all bending rules for a man who plays pretend for a living." Maria turned slowly, and the way she looked at him didn't involve a single raised voice. "I've cleaned up after you when you shouted at interns. I've stood between you and crying nurses. But you've never yelled at someone who could fight back. Until now." Renner stepped back slightly. Maria didn't raise her voice. "She didn't need to. You see a celebrity," she said. "But the rest of us? We see a man who's done more for these walls in silence than you ever did with a stethoscope." Brad stayed still. He didn't need to gloat. He didn't need revenge. But then the elevator at the end of the hall dinged open. Out stepped a small girl, maybe 9, holding her four-stand in one hand, a balloon tied to the other. Behind her, her father, the janitor. Pale, exhausted, eyes wide with worry. The moment the girl saw Brad, she lit up. She didn't scream. Didn't run, she just smiled. "That's him," she whispered to her dad. "The man from the note." The janitor froze. Looked at Brad. Realized. Then looked at the doctor. Realized more. Renner's face twisted, but he said nothing. The little girl walked forward. "You don't have to say anything," Brad said gently. "I'm just glad you're okay." She handed him the balloon. "I wanted to give you something." Renner couldn't speak. Couldn't move, and that was the moment the power shifted, not because of money, not because of security, but because truth, when spoken without anger, makes pride look pitiful. Doctor. Renner's jaw was locked. That he was surrounded, not physically, but worse morally. The girl's balloon floated gently between him and Brad, as if it too wanted space from the man who'd let arrogance turn into cruelty. Her father stood behind her, stunned into stillness. Maria, the veteran nurse, hadn't moved. The guard remained by the door, silent, but alert, as if sensing a final move was coming, and it did. "I want him out," Renner hissed through his teeth, pointing at Brad. "I don't care who he is. I don't care what he paid. This is still a medical facility. Not a goddamn photo op." Nobody moved. He reached for his phone again. "I'm calling the police," he snapped, this time with venom. "Let them sort this out. Maybe when you're in cuffs, you'll remember you don't run the world." Brad finally turned to face him fully. "No one's trying to run the world," he said calmly. "I just came to visit a little girl whose life mattered enough to help. You don't belong here." Renner barked, "Neither do you," Maria said quietly, but Renner wasn't listening anymore. His fingers stabbed the phone screen as he walked away, pacing toward the window at the end of the hall. "I need police dispatched to Westwood Medical," he said into the phone. "I have a trespasser aggressive, impersonating medical personnel. Possible danger to pediatric patients." Everyone in the hallway heard it, and for the first time, Brad's composure cracked not with anger, but disbelief. He took a slow breath. Looked at the little girl, who now clutched her bear tighter. Then at her father, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "You're lying," Brad said, voice heavy, controlled. "You're lying to the police to protect your ego." Renner turned. "I'm protecting this institution from parasites who think money makes them gods." Then the janitor spoke. "He's not pretending," the man said. His voice shook. "He paid for my daughter's surgery. When my insurance failed. When you," he turned to Renner, "told us she wasn't a priority." A hush fell again. Maria stepped forward. "You told us to reallocate surgical hours away from her. You said she was a drain on resources." Brad looked at Renner with eyes that didn't accuse, they mourned. "You're not a bad doctor because of what you said to me," he said. "You're a bad doctor because you stopped seeing people. You turned pain into policy." That landed. And yet Renner sneered, "I've run this floor for 12 years. You think a couple tears and a bear make you the good guy?" Brad took one step forward. "Not loud. Not dramatic. Just closer." "No," he said. "But calling the cops on a donor who saved your patient's life, that makes you unforgettable for all the wrong reasons." Then the sirens echoed outside, blue and red flashed through the windows, the hallway froze again. Brad didn't flinch. He walked over to the girl, crouched down, and whispered something into her ear. She nodded, hugged him. He stood up, placed a hand on her father's shoulder, and stepped back. Security opened the door for the arriving officers. Point 2 walked in. Their faces changed the moment they saw who was standing there. Point 1 of them, Officer Grant, approached the doctor first. "We received a report of a trespasser," he asked, calm but firm. "That's him," Renner said confidently. "He's causing a scene. He doesn't have clearance. He's harassing staff and patients." Officer Grant slowly turned his gaze to Brad. "Mr. Pitt," he said, "do you need us here?" Renner froze. "Wait, you know him?" The officer nodded. "Everyone on this force knows him. He's been funding our recovery program for the past 5 years. And this hospital is on the same list." Maria folded her arms. The silence now wasn't awkward, that it was devastating. The second officer looked at Renner. "Are you the one who made the call?" Renner's mouth opened. Then closed. Brad finally spoke again, voice steady, low, and final. "This isn't about me being a celebrity," he said. "It's about someone in power deciding they were too important to be decent. That's not leadership. That's rot." He turned to the officers. "I don't want charges. I don't want noise. I want accountability." Then he looked at Maria. "Call the board," he said. "And the hospital director. Effective immediately, I'm requesting Dr. Renner's removal. From this wing. From this building. From any institution where people are already suffering enough." Renner tried to protest. "You can't." "I can," Brad said. "And I just did." The hallway didn't cheer, they didn't clap, they just stood in still, haunted silence, because sometimes justice doesn't need an audience, that it just needs to show up. The police left 20 minutes later, they took no statements. No charges were filed, but the silence they left behind cracked the walls louder than handcuffs ever could. Doctor Renner hadn't been escorted out, not yet, that he still had his badge. His office. His title. But now he walked through his own hallways like a man being watched through glass, by nurses who no longer smiled, by orderlies who no longer moved out of his way, by patients' families who whispered the moment he passed. And Brad, he didn't leave. He sat with Lila for a while, talked to her father, held the bear while she fell asleep, and then he walked straight to the boardroom. No appointment. No warning. No press. Just his name, and the silence that followed him like gravity. Inside, the Hospital's administrative board was mid-meeting. Coffee cups. Charts. Laptops. Budgets. When Brad walked in, every head lifted, half of them stood. One man. The director cleared his throat. "Mr. Pitt," he said. "We didn't expect." "I know," Brad interrupted. "That's part of the problem." He didn't sit that he reached into his jacket pocket and placed a single-page document on the center of the table. "I'm calling for an emergency ethics review of Dr. Renner's conduct," he said. "Effective now." "Mr. Pitt," the director began, but Brad raised a hand. "Not rude. Just final. I don't want a PR stunt. I don't want press releases. I want integrity. I've spent years funding this place, because I believed it was different. But if the people at the top are just as cruel as the world outside, then what's the point?" Silence. The board members looked at each other, then at the document. That it wasn't a lawsuit, that it wasn't a demand, that it was a testimony signed by Maria. By Lila's father. By 3 other nurses. 2 junior doctors. A security officer. Each one documented a different day, a different insult, a different moment they'd swallowed because they thought no one would care, until someone did. Meanwhile, in another part of the hospital, Renner sat in his office, blinds closed, fists clenched that he could feel it unraveling, the whispers. The looks. The sudden pause when he entered a room. And the one word he hadn't heard in 12 years, spoken behind his back, louder every hour: replacement. He opened his laptop. Checked the staff logs, and there it was. Brad's name. Registered as donor. Primary contributor. Board liaison, and authorized to initiate formal internal disciplinary procedures. His power wasn't just symbolic, that it was structural. Renner slammed the lid shut, stood up, and walked out of his office, straight toward the pediatric wing, face burning, heart pounding that he wasn't finished, not yet. The hallway leading to the pediatric wing had never felt so narrow. Dr. Renner's shoes tapped sharply against the tile. His hands were clenched at his sides. His chest was tight, but not from stress, from rage. The kind of rage only wounded pride produces. He hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. His authority, his reputation, his name, all of it was slipping away, and there was only one man to blame, Brad Pitt. That he passed nurses who quickly turned away. Some ducked into rooms. Some simply stared at the floor. They had all chosen their side. That he reached the wing and found Brad standing beside Lila's bed, quietly speaking to her father. Maria stood nearby, holding a chart, her expression unreadable. Renner didn't stop walking. That he stepped straight into the room, without knocking. "You think this is over?" he said, voice tight, quiet but shaking with fury. "You think you can come in here, wave your money around, and undo everything I've built?" Brad turned slowly. Lila's father immediately stepped in front of her, protective. Maria moved closer, her eyes narrowing. "You shouldn't be here." "I'm still chief of admittance," Renner snapped. "Not for long," Maria said. "Not after what's being reviewed." Renner ignored her. His eyes were locked on Brad. "You couldn't stand being thanked behind closed doors, could you?" he hissed. "You wanted applause. You wanted people crying at your feet. You weren't here for her, you were here for the moment." Brad didn't flinch. "You don't know a thing about me." "Oh, I know enough," Renner said, stepping closer. "I know you're a washed-up actor trying to stay relevant by playing the humble savior. You walked in here with a bear like it was a movie prop. You paid for one surgery and think that makes you God." Brad's shoulders tensed. Lila, half awake, stirred in her bed. Her father's hand shook on the rail. "You can say whatever you want about me," Brad said, low and calm. "But don't raise your voice in front of her." Renner laughed coldly. "Oh, right, because you're the protector now. The great moral compass. I've seen what people like you do. You swoop in, play hero, and fly out while the rest of us stay behind cleaning up." "I didn't ask to be called a hero," Brad replied. "But you beg to be feared. You think kindness matters in medicine?" Renner sneered. "You think empathy gets surgeries done? What gets things done is control. Power. Fear. I run this place because I'm willing to be hated. You think you've won something here, but all you've done is weaken a system that used to function. Maria stepped forward, voice sharp. Function? Is that what you call screaming at nurses? Denying children care based on cost? Humiliating people until they quit? Renner turned on her. You've always been soft. No, she said, eyes blazing. I've always been decent. And you hate that because decency exposes you. Silence, then Brad walked toward him, not fast. Not threatening, just close enough to speak without anyone else hearing. You've had years to do good, he said. And instead, you built a throne out of fear. You wore a coat like it gave you the right to belittle anyone who didn't bow. Renner stared at him, trembling. You lost this place the moment you stopped caring who walked through the door, Brad continued. But I'm not here to finish you. You've already done that yourself. Then the hospital director's voice echoed from the doorway. Dr. Renner, he said, holding a folder, your contract is terminated. Effective immediately. We've already notified the licensing board. Renner didn't move. Didn't blink, just stood there, as everything he'd built collapsed in a hallway full of the very people he never learned to respect. A nurse stepped forward and gently placed a small cardboard box on the floor beside him, his office belongings. Already packed, Renner looked down at it, his hands were shaking. No one said anything more, because there was nothing left to say. Brad didn't watch him leave. He turned back to Lila. She was asleep again, but her father was crying now, silently. Gratefully, Maria wiped her eyes with her sleeve and didn't speak, because this wasn't victory, this was justice. Quiet, overdue, and complete. 3 weeks later, the hospital was different. No banners were hung. No articles published, but something had shifted. Lila was recovering quickly now. She asked fewer questions about the man who visited her, and more about when she could go outside again. Her father, now offered a full-time position in hospital facilities with benefits, walked the halls with quiet pride. And Maria, still holding the ward together with kindness and strength, now led the new staff mentorship program. But in the west hallway, beside the pediatric wing, something new was being built. It wasn't large, it wasn't loud, but it meant everything. The small room had no nameplate yet. Just fresh paint. Clean chairs. A long wooden bench pressed gently against the wall. There were no 4 poles here. No computers. No machines, only peace. This room wasn't made for patients. It wasn't for board members or physicians. It was for the invisible. The overworked nurse on the verge of quitting, the janitor who ate lunch standing, the intern who just made her first mistake and couldn't stop shaking, the father who didn't know how to cry in front of his daughter. It was for them, and Brad had built it. No plaque bore his name. No one announced it on television, but everyone who stepped into that room knew something sacred lived there, not because of who funded it, but because someone had finally said, they deserve better. Brad returned to the hospital once more, not as a guest. Not to check on Lila. Not to talk to the board. He came early in the morning, alone, with a notebook in his hand. He walked into the room. Sat on the wooden bench, and for a long time, just listened. The silence. The breath of a place that no longer carried fear. The space Renner once poisoned now filled with warmth. A nurse walked by, paused at the door, and said nothing. Just nodded. Brad smiled. Not big. Just enough. He tore a page from the notebook and placed it gently on the small side table. It read, this is not a memorial, this is a beginning. If you're here, you belong. Rest. Then rise. And keep going. He stood. Looked around one last time, and walked out, leaving behind no signature, no spotlight, only a room that didn't exist until someone refused to stay silent, because in a world loud with power, sometimes the greatest thing a man can do, is give people a place to breathe.